Welcome to the Nock on Archery podcast, where we bring all archers and bow hunters together from all walks of life with the goal to educate, empower, and inspire you to be better both in the field and on the range. That's how you used to wear your bangs right there, bro. Is that how you wore your bangs, Tony Hawk style?
My hair has been like this most of my life.
Has it?
They shaved head.
Did you do that in wrestling? They like cut weight?
We never had wrestling.
What?
At Texas is football, man. That's it.
Dang, I can't even believe that. How do I not know that?
Well, there's we got some wrestling programs now. Like the little town we live in has a good wrestling team, and they're really investing in it. But I know when I was growing up, it was you played football, basketball, baseball. That was it. So.
Oh, I guess basketball got mixed in there. Man, you could have had some legit freaking linemen if they would have been wrestling in the wintertime.
Definitely.
Just saying.
For sure. Did you wrestle?
I did, just because I hated my basketball coach. I actually didn't like wrestling. Mainly because when I was 7th grade or 8th grade, I was like still in my fat stage and just got some beat. Like I was in like 155 or something dumb in 7th grade. And so I was just in freaking get pummeled class. Yeah, I rolled in like, I'm going to do wrestling, and then just got freaking beat up on. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to start trying to slam dunk a basketball instead. That was it. So I went Texas mode.
Right on. It's a great sport. Yeah. Anytime I'm rolling jiu-jitsu with a wrestler, you're like, okay, I'm going to get taken down. Just get ready to pull guard, try to sweep.
Yeah. Time to sprawl, baby.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one thing that, like, just the fact that I did wrestling for a year was just like learning the technique of sprawling. I don't know what you got going there. That's why you don't go sidewinder in freaking Iowa, bro. You keep trying to do this Tony Hawk freaking haircut thing you got going. Jesus, how many directions are you going to move that microphone? Dang it. Go. Dude, just freaking take the battle head on and it'll work just fine. or do what you do with your freaking peep sight and put your head in some kind of crazy direction to look through your screen.
I just like to challenge myself, John.
Maybe you're a flanker. Maybe you're a flanker. You like that reach around technique, that from around and from the back.
Take it easy.
Oh, that's awesome. Dude, I'm pumped that you're here. Straight up, though. Last year, honestly, it was like, this is pretty much our 1-year anniversary, just because I was going out to Biss's house to teach him archery. You know Biss? Matt Biss?
Yeah.
So I was going out to his house prior to TAC, and I literally got in my truck, and it was like, I think it was like 12 hours or something to get out there. And I just started going through Audible, and I'm like, I'm going to nail this. The only time I'm going to stop this extreme ownership book is when I got to jump out and like put diesel in this sucker and take a leak. And so that's what I did. Freaking power mode, dude, straight through start to finish. So what was amazing about the audiobook is I love that you and Jocko actually read it, because it was like more powerful, and you've got, kind of this brash radio voice. I don't know if you create that or if that's just like in there.
I talk in a high squeaky voice.
Yeah. Normally, yeah, like Mike Tyson.
I just fake it when I'm on the.
As soon as he gets.
Hey guys, what's going on?
But no, honestly, it's the one book where if someone's gonna like crap on you for doing the audio book, it's way better, because it's like a Jocko podcast that's freaking 12 hours long with unbelievable content in it. Like, and the fact that you guys read through all of them is just super cool, because, like for me, it's weird because I know Jack Carr and I know how he like talks to me about a book. And I was lucky enough to, like, especially in the third book, he sent me like a couple texts like, hey, I'm going down this avenue. Can you just double check a couple of these things the way I'm like referencing them and stuff? So it was like, from my aspect, I was hearing it from the author's voice, like as it was being created. So it was really cool for that book to actually know that you guys did it, because it was like, at least in my opinion, it would be like going to a concert, but they're not lip syncing. Like, it's the guys actually saying it how it is. And I don't know how long it took you guys to do it, but it's cool that you did, because it really came across like more powerful that someone else wasn't trying to say that for you guys.
Well, I appreciate that, John. That's great feedback, and we really wanted to read it ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we wanted to write it ourselves. I mean, we were told, we had to use an author. 5 major publishing houses turned us down and said, pass, or this isn't good enough, or only through an author. You guys can't write this yourself. So we really wanted to do that, and so then we said. I actually said that if we can't get James Earl Jones to read the book for us, then we're reading it ourselves. And apparently James Earl Jones wasn't available. So
dang it,
that would have been pretty cool. But
yeah,
we wanted to share stories that could help people and talk about not the things we did right, but the things we actually did wrong. Which is failure is the best teacher oftentimes.
Yeah, and
it just you learn so much from failure, just like the screw up shooting with you today. Like that's what I learned from. That's what I you get a chance to actually learn from that. You remember it and it's then you get better. So it's we didn't talk about what went great. We talked about what actually sucked or what we screwed up, and that's something that hopefully other leaders can learn from.
Well, it depends on your student too. I feel like a good coach takes a little bit of time to analyze how they can approach the student. Because, I mean, if I felt like you were going to cry about it, I probably would have been like clapping behind you and said, that's great. That's what you need to do. Man, I'm impressed. But no, I just waited for the moment to just freaking turn the fork and just say like, dang, man, quit on that one, huh?
If you don't follow through with John, you get accused of being a quitter, which in the SEAL teams is the worst thing you can call somebody.
Yeah, you just turn, you're like, what? I'm like, you heard me. You quit on that. And then I like showed you a couple times, and then you were just like, yeah, that was pretty powerful. So then I said, what was the next? So I go, oh, maybe you want me to say it like, how did I say it that second time? I like rephrased it.
And it was something about quitting or being a quitter.
I think, I said something like, oh, you just didn't follow through with what you were supposed to do or something. You're just like, that's just as bad.
Gave up. Yeah,
you just gave up on it.
Yeah, we that was awesome instruction. But I think you learn from your mistakes, and everyone is going to make mistakes. And I think the idea of extreme ownership is that you just all you have to do is learn from those mistakes and implement a solution to fix those mistakes going forward, and that enables you to get better every time. And I think that's the power of that book and in sharing those mistakes. In fact, the biggest mistake, I mean, the opening chapter of that book,
is amazing.
Jocko did not want to put that in there originally. That was not the opening chapter. The original opening chapter is the chapter 2 about the boat cruise. That was the original opening chapter when we were working on the manuscript, and I was like, man, I'm thinking about the most powerful example of extreme ownership that we can think of, and it was when you stood up in front of the room and took ownership of this horrible blue on blue, friendly fire situation. When we knew that Jocko wasn't, even though he was our boss, he was a task unit commander, and we knew that he hadn't been in the exact building where that horrible situation took place, and he wasn't the guy that misidentified an Iraqi soldier and all those things, or he wasn't with the Iraqi soldiers that were out of their sector and shouldn't have been there in the first place, and it was just a series of these compounding events. But yet to see him take ownership of that whole thing was incredibly powerful. And so when I first suggested that, he's like, I don't think we should put that in the book, and it was. It was something it's hard to write about. It's a big black eye to say, hey, we screwed this up and this is my fault. And after we talked about it for a little bit, he was like, you're right, we need to write it. And so he wrote it, and And I think it's the most powerful chapter of all, because it shows like when there's real consequences, something terrible happens, like the power of extreme ownership. And instead of people losing trust in you when something bad happens, if you take ownership and say, here's what we're going to do to make sure this never happens again.
Yeah.
People actually gain trust in you, which is incredible.
Well, and I think the fact that you guys had that discussion, and at first it wasn't like all agreed on I think once Jocko thought about it, he realized how important your feeling was on it. And that's like a real message. And so in true Jocko fashion, he like got gritty enough on that whole thing to where you recognize the importance of like, oh, damn, this actually is a life or death situation. This isn't like, what if I don't give this guy his vacation time? It was a good way to pretty much like place the stake of, this is how serious this book is, and like, what you have to be able to own up on, which in that case was, blue on blue, right? And was that the first casualty too?
That was the first big operation of Task Unit Bruiser when we first arrived there. It was the first major operation we were part of.
So yeah, from an internal aspect, you knew like, oh, great, freaking all eyes on us right away. We come in here and lose a dude, right?
Yeah, in that case, we didn't lose one of our guys. We did got some. Yeah. We had a guy that was wounded, and it could have gone horribly. Yeah. We could have lost every single person. I mean, they were about to coordinate.
Is that the one with like where the 50 cal was just freaking raining in?
Yeah.
You know what's crazy is Jocko told me that story before. Like honestly, I think it was before we really talked in relation to like what our fields were. I knew who Jocko was, but I didn't necessarily dive down the extreme ownership side of things to where I knew. And so I think it was when we were like on our first hunt together, we were just, somewhere where we were both tired, just, worn out. And so we just started talking, and he just started talking about like that situation. And he didn't apply it to the book. He was just we were talking about something, something like that sucked and we learned from. And he was just talking about like, that moment. He's like, dude, we're in this building. There's just freaking 50 cal, just freaking boom, boom, and a dude like takes a round to the face, and he just, and he was just saying like, it's just horrible. It's like the freaking, and I don't know what the situation was, so I'm probably not doing it justice, but I know the meaning of like, I know how serious that was. So it was a really cool way to start it. And it like, even though it wasn't the initial plan, it was like it was meant to be the way it went, because it was an attention getter.
Well, I thank God for that. I mean, had that incident happened, I mean, an Iraqi soldier was killed, and that was tragic and horrible. But had we not encountered that incident right out of the gate, I think we'd have lost half our platoon, half our task unit with friendly fire. But it was, it made us realize just how easily this can happen. And if we don't take extreme measures to mitigate the risk of it happening every single time, it's going to happen. I mean, the urban combat, that we were involved in Ramadi in 2006, I think we got shot at by friendlies at least, 6 or 8 times. And we're like, absolutely, that's friendly shooting at us. And then probably another dozen times that I'm pretty sure it was friendlies, but I can't be, positive. So it happened all the time.
Yeah.
And it was, but we took extreme steps, and when it did happen, we could stop it, and when we were prepared for it. So, we would throw this orange signal panel, over the side of the building, and so all the bad guys everywhere could know exactly where we were, but that would prevent us from getting shot at by friendlies. Or we would signal with flares, or we'd contact folks on the radio, and we just had measures in place, and so we're getting shot at, and we were able to keep it from we could call ceasefire, we could get the rounds to stop, we had measures in place to mitigate the risk of that, and so it never happened again where we got guys seriously wounded or killed. And if we hadn't learned that lesson, I mean, it would almost certainly have happened in a really tragic and horrible situation, definitely.
You know what was cooler about it is when the second book came out, it was really cool because to me, and I didn't just listen to it because it was Jocko. You know, I wanted, there's certain things that I'll spend personal time with. And if I have to assess like, okay, I'm going to be on my, lawnmower for 3 hours. What do I really want to do? So there, there's certain times where it's like, okay, I'm going to allocate it to a book, but if it's a book, it's going to be something that's like self-improvement more so than entertainment type thing. So when the second book came out, it was cool that in a way you guys took ownership that some people did not grasp the direction of extreme ownership. It's like they took it too far. Right. And then so you had to like break it down and kind of say like, all right, we're going to take ownership, and somehow a bunch of idiots didn't read this the right way. 'Cause I totally got it. But then when the second one came out, I started to realize like, wait a minute, people implied it that way, like the first book. And it seemed like, yeah, maybe people like took it to an extreme to where they didn't get the basic concept, right?
People think they should be extreme in everything, you know, and that's the reason we had to dive into that in the dichotomy of leadership, is that when it comes to ownership and not blaming other people and actually accepting ownership of a situation, you should be extreme. And I think that term is a very valid one. I mean, it's something that, Jocko was trying to describe what was required of leadership when he was working with some leaders, and he that term immediately resonated. I was like, that's exactly what it has to be. When he shared that with me the first time, I was like, that's spot on. And it was, even though we didn't have that term, we worked together in Task Unit Bruiser, it captured the essence of what effective leadership looked like. And that was with every unit we served with and everybody that we saw that was successful. But when you become, if you try to go extreme in everything you're doing, you see people that they come in real aggressively, and we'll see a business leader that comes in is dropping Jocko quotes and pointing fingers and say, you need to start taking ownership and you need to start doing this and that. And of course, that is the direct approach that doesn't work. And it turns people off, and you get people pushing back on that. And we've had leaders that were like banned from even quoting Jocko or me or talking about the books at their work, because they came in freaking Rambo style, and it just over the top. And so instead of trying to find the balance, and that's why we wrote Dichotomy of Leadership, to expand on that 12th chapter of extreme ownership. I mean, everything you do it's trying to find balance in the equilibrium between these forces that are pulling you in two different directions, and you can take things like, you got to be a leader, you got to be willing to step up and lead, but you also got to be a follower as well. If you can't follow and you can't actually carry out the orders of those over you and let other people lead, then you're not going to be successful. And if you got to be detached. Detachment is really important so that you can see and kind of understand what the priorities are and make sure that you're focused on the proper strategic objectives. But if you're too detached and you don't know what's going on, you can't help your team, and you can't support them, and there's you're actually failing as a leader. So it's trying to find the balance between those things, and really, we talk about decentralized command is really important as well. You need to empower the team. They get leaders on the team at every level need to step up and lead, rather than the one senior person that's barking orders and telling everybody what to do. That's centralized command. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you want to use decentralized command, but then you also have to have extreme ownership as well. So you're responsible for everything, but you can't do everything. And I think trying to find the balance there is crucial.
Sometimes you can lead by listening. Like I've had a lot of meetings where as a meeting transpires, I realize like who is not talking. And then it's almost like I'm waiting for them to say something, because I know they're thinking and they're listening, they're taking it in, and they're going to make a decision. And honestly, their decision is probably going to have the least amount of emotional attachment. And it's like, okay, and you see that person speak up and you're like 100% listening. Like, okay, this guy just came from he's been looking at this from an Overwatch. So he's seen this whole chess match play from not a one side, two side perspective. And so it makes you want to like listen to what they say. So sometimes with the leader, the quieter they get when they choose to speak, the right people that are like actually wanting to be led, they're going to be like, oh, this person hasn't been fighting the whole time. They're about ready to say something. What are they going to say? And it's almost like your point's going to get across better as a leader by listening first and like kind of, you know, looking at it from an outside perspective, which is like I talked to you about that today when we were shooting, and you were telling me what you were feeling. And I'm like, I know what you tell me you're feeling, but trust me, I'm looking at it from not where you're looking at it from. And you are freaking a half inch from like perfection, but you're just not trusting it yet because you can't see it from my angle. And so then as soon as we got your bow, it was like, you know, you were able to kind of understand what I knew you were doing, but you know, you weren't like seeing it for yourself. And then it, you know, it was immediately there and you were kind of taken by surprise. Like, oh yeah, that freaking felt awesome.
It did feel awesome. That silverback is legit, man. For me, I think that was, you know, I've been shooting for 20 years with a release. Waz was asking me today, like, when'd you start shooting with a wrist strap? And I was like, man, it's been over 20 years. And so I got a lot of bad habits and you know, to be able to transition with your guidance there so quickly to that, I was probably overthinking it in my head and thinking it was going to be more of a problem than it was. And I think with your guidance and doing that, that thing is awesome, man. It's
yeah. In a way, it was fun because like I knew you were worried about it, and I was 100% not worried about it.
You're like, just suck it up, get in there, make it happen.
Yeah, I wonder what Jocko would have been, you know, doing. So when you guys,
when Jocko smells weakness or lack of confidence, it's pile on. I've always noticed if you watch him coach in jiu-jitsu, he doesn't help the person that's getting smashed. He will coach the person who's doing the smashing 100% of the time. So that's what he's gonna do. He's gonna just like pile on, like try to get under your skin.
Damn. Freaking tough love.
That's pretty standard in the SEAL teams, though. The worst thing you can ever do is let somebody know what gets under your skin because they're gonna just hammer down.
I know.
Just
yeah, but the thing is, from the amount of SEALs I've met, it seems like because of that thinking, they almost overly make fun of what you actually know does bug them. They like try to make fun of it more so that you won't touch on it, and that's a tell. I mean, there's, you know, a bunch of you, including yourself, like when you say, dang, bro, you're short, you're just like, you know, big heart or whatever you say.
Doesn't bother me, man.
Yeah, don't bother me.
Bring it on. Yeah.
So true. Yeah, I think I would have struggled on some of the ships, though.
Yeah, well, you're a big dude. Look, all I ever wanted to be was like 6'9", you know, 400 pounds. And just...
Damn, bro. Freaking.
I think the world it would have been a wild place. Yeah. I never quite get there. I stopped growing.
Shaq Babin.
In about
that has a good ring to it though.
Probably my eighth grade. I'm almost as big as I was in eighth grade right now. In like ninth grade, I was like 5'10", probably 190 pounds. Yeah.
So you look like Eminem.
So I was like smashing everybody.
No, you weren't.
I was twice everybody's size my freshman year in high school, and then as everybody got bigger than me and started, I was like, okay, Jack, it's the way it is.
When did Jocko get bigger? When did he start filling out? Was he big when you met him?
Yeah, I mean
has he been straight up gorilla since birth?
No, I mean I think when he went through Buds, he was 185 pounds.
I did see him there. He was pretty light for sure. So when you guys first went over to Ramadi, and I'm kind of digging back into some of this because I feel like what you guys teach is so imperative, not just to business, but to students. And so like my angle for this podcast is, if you like, anytime someone teaches you something that's good, you can direct it to, oh man, I'm going to apply these principles to weightlifting, even though it's about like, management, right, within a company and stuff. But it's like, what if I direct this as as a person trying to become a world-class archer, and there's this unbelievable leadership, tool out there, or just like, honestly, like a self-improvement tool. It's like, can you actually look at that and say, how can I apply this to what I'm trying to be good at? Not necessarily just business. And I think the same rules apply. Like, I think the same rules of sports psychology apply to what it would take to make a really good employee. It's like, yeah, there's ego-driven, mentality people that are exceptional athletes, but they also super exceed and they super decline. But there's also task-driven people that, if you give them a task and a clear task and they're able to achieve goals, they just continue to freaking grind and grind and grind, because all they want to do is complete the task at the best of their ability and like continue to complete goals and move forward. And so it's like, okay, if I can apply those same principles at me as an employee, guess what? Like, in this company, in our company, you would 100%, like, I would see that so freaking fast, and you would set yourself up to be able to move to probably things that I haven't even thought we needed yet. I'd be like, this guy freaking needs to get a belt change. But people don't look at it that way, right? I mean, it seems like that's a dying freaking self-thirst.
When you say belt change, are you talking about a promotion?
Yeah, I'm talking about
like jiu-jitsu
yeah,
style?
like, I mean, Jocko probably takes them away. Like, I guess I'll find out. But
when you say belt change, I'm thinking machine guns here. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, put in some heavier ammo. But yeah, I'm just saying, if where I'm from, when I see someone wholeheartedly putting in effort for the team and like applying extra time and effort into self-improvement, it's like, you want to encourage that. I mean, it'd take a real idiot to just say, oh yeah, whatever, he's just doing his thing. Any like employee now would just be like, man, this is freaking super hard to come by. If there's ever a time that you could excel as a person trying to grow in a company, right now would be the time, to where if you had work ethic like your grandpa, you would, and you really fought for self-improvement, you would freaking make leaps and bounds without accolades of degree. I think that work ethic and, taking extreme ownership, trying to, have extreme leadership too. I think that stuff would be recognized so fast right now.
I think it's 100% true. Absolutely. And what you're really talking about there, when you're talking about work ethic, I would describe as discipline, right? And that's, Jocko's personal mantra is discipline equals freedom. And that's something that, he really brought into us in Tasking and Bruiser. And, you want freedom to excel at the highest levels. You got to have discipline. Discipline is the pathway to freedom. And even though they seem like totally opposite things, freedom is the ability to do whatever you want to, whenever you want to. Discipline is a rigid, structured thing. The pathway to freedom is discipline. And, he always gives examples of, you want financial freedom. How do you get that? You got to be able to work hard, save your money, not spend it on things that you don't need, invest it wisely. That's how you get financial freedom. Same thing for time. You want more free time. You got to actually have a disciplined time management system. Is the only way you're going to be able to create more free time for yourself. And I think that a lot of people will look at somebody who is successful, like yourself, with Nock on and all that you guys are doing, and say, well, he got lucky or he's in the right place at the right time. And I hear this all the time from leaders. And yet we work with incredibly successful leaders, and then we'll work with different leaders within a company where there's some hot performers that, the 2 or 3 top performers, and there's other folks that are kind of throwing some shade at them and thinking that they just got lucky. And when you look at what makes those people good, it's that they have discipline. They're the top salespeople, they have the discipline to make the calls that they're supposed to make. They're making the cold calls. They're going through the checklists. They're going out and meeting people. Instead of going out with their friends, drinking on Friday night, they're working and they're putting in the extra time that you're talking about. And I saw the same thing with Chris Kyle on the battlefield. It was our lead sniper and point man. And some of the other guys in the platoon were like, giving him a heart, like, how does his numbers are so much higher than us? How is that even possible? And and he was doing a lot of damage to the bad guys, certainly in Ramadi. And man, I would watch him in Overwatch. He's like sitting on for 2 or 3 straight hours, just looking down the scope of his weapon. That's it. He's not coming off his weapon. And the other guys, some of them they would sit on their weapon for half an hour, and then they start kind of sitting back a little bit. Sounds and then like they start joking with their buddy. And next thing you know, they're like sitting way back in their chair and just looking through their binoculars every once in a while. And so then they're wondering, like, why is Chris more successful? And it's kind of, from a hunting perspective, it's exactly the same. If you think, oh, that guy got lucky, he killed that big buck, or they don't see all the hard work and the research that's going into it, and the scouting and all the effort that you put into that. And I think it's very much the same thing. If you want to be successful at anything, you got to have discipline. You got to be able to work hard, and you got to actually, if you can outwork everybody else, that's giving you a massive advantage. And most people don't have discipline. So if you have discipline, you're able to be successful. But one thing that you're saying I think is really important is, when you're talking about leadership development and the willingness to learn and work hard. There is, we talk about, people think about leader, well, you're kind of born with this leadership ability or not. And that's just not true at all. If there's one thing that I've come to understand, that is that leadership is a skill. It's a skill that can be learned, and you have to train it all the time. Like archery, like physical training. If you want to be strong, you want to be fit, you can't just work out one time or go to a seminar for a weekend or train for 2 weeks and expect that you're going to maintain great shape. You got to do it all the time. And so it's a skill you got to work on. If you take that discipline and work ethic, as you call it, and put that toward growing and learning as a leader, and trying to learn these skills and then implement these skills, it absolutely works. And it's kind of like you've given me, I'm doing things totally differently with my hand position or my stance or, the way I'm positioning my hand. Just the knocking point of where I'm getting that hand position today. And when I'm doing what you say and not overthinking it, I'm like, dang, that works. That put that arrow exactly where I was just holding. That's amazing. And I think it's the same way with leadership. When someone's telling me about some problem they're having with this person with a big ego, and you don't understand, how big of an ego they have, and I have to work with this person. And I'm the whole time thinking, well, they ain't the only one with a big ego. Yeah. Because
I deal with this tomorrow, yesterday.
Yeah.
Next week, I got another one scheduled.
Well, when you can put your ego in check, then we can, let's say you and I are having a clash, we're having a clash and you want to go one way and I want to go the other way. And if I could put my ego in check and say, hey, well, John, how do you want to do it? Okay, let me go to you. Something you talked about right earlier, listening. It's a underrated leadership skill. It's something Jock has been talking a lot about lately. It's a super underrated leadership skill. And if what that requires is me to put my ego in check, listen to you, listen to your ideas. And so we will talk someone through that. Sometimes we'll even role play that exercise, and it takes several iterations of having a conversation with someone where you're going to put your ego in check. And then they'll go and have that conversation, and they come back and they're like, dang, I can't believe how good that works.
Freaking sniper.
So it's the same thing. It works. And then they're like, okay, so let me try it a little more. And I think when you're, we know these things to be true, just as, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of reps that you have, probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of reps of putting arrows down range, where you've learned what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's the same thing for us as leadership. We're we get to see this all the time, and we work with, giant corporations to small startups, and charity organizations and police departments and fire departments and everywhere in between. And you see these different leadership challenges, and most of them are the same.
Yeah.
Like I'm coming in thinking I have some unique challenge or issue, and you've probably seen it 1,000 times,
Is there, I feel like there would be the most trouble from like the startups and the really high ups, where you've had like the super powerful egos like just crush their way to the top, and now they're at this big place, and people underneath them are challenged, like trying to deal with it. Or then the startups where it's like, this is mine, my name's on the building, Is the middle ground a little bit more safer water, or is there still egos on every level?
Look, everyone's got an ego, and I think any of us, you're not going to be successful, if you don't have an ego. I wouldn't be successful if I didn't have an ego. You wouldn't be successful if you didn't have an ego. So ego drives us to be, successful, and that's awesome. We want to outperform others. We want to do better than others. We want to win the archery contest. We certainly want to. When we would go into a neighborhood that was totally enemy controlled in Ramadi back in 2006, and I would talk to these incredibly courageous and awesome warriors, the company commanders and their platoon sergeant, their company first sergeants, and the platoon commanders and platoon sergeants in these platoons and in these U.S. Marine and Army companies that we worked with and platoons, and when they'd say like, man, you guys are going to go into that neighborhood? Like nobody can get into that neighborhood. Like that's a really bad place. So we're like, yeah, that's where we're going to go. We wanted to do that. We wanted to go places that other people couldn't go. And we weren't just trying to be stupid about it. We tried to mitigate the risk we can control, and they would come out and help us if they would do everything they could to get to us in their tanks and their Bradley fighting vehicles to deliver firepower on our behalf, which they did all the time. But we took pride in being able to do things that other people couldn't do, and ego drives that, and that's awesome. Yeah. But when ego can also be an incredibly destructive thing. The most destructive thing. As Jocko wrote in Extreme Ownership, it clouds and disrupts everything. And people will, you'll see people that they'll ride their idea into the ground, even when it's clearly going to lead to the destruction of their entire team and to their own detriment. It's even when self-preservation, people will just disregard their own self-preservation just to not say they were wrong.
Yeah, dude, but every now and then some dude freaking comes out of that and like has the clapper or something and freaking just nails this unbelievable idea where everyone's just like, who wants to clap and turn their lights on and off? And you're like, damn it, freaking I'm on, QVC now or whatever. Every now and then there's someone that freaking rides it to the grave and somehow like doesn't crash and burn.
When you have a good idea,
you do need it. It's funny, isn't it? Because you have to have that, like that drive of not losing, not ringing the bell. This idea is good. People don't get it. Like no one's getting my idea. I'm gonna die with this thing.
Well, I think you can have certainly confidence in the idea for sure, right?
Yeah.
And when look, I think I know you've done a lot of things differently that enable you to be successful, and taken risks and done things that other people wouldn't do, and that's been the same thing for us as well, both on the battlefield, in tasking a bruiser, when Jock and I are working together, and now with Echelon Front, like we've gone a different path than other folks. When the publisher said we couldn't do it, as I talked about, or people said, hey, you can't do this or can't do that. Look, our ego drives us to say, okay, we're gonna. If we really understand there's a need for this, or really understand that this is actually the way to go,
it's a really good example.
Then we're gonna push in that direction, and ego is a great driver for that. I think, but you just have to. You have to be able to evaluate where you are and see, hey, we tried this thing isn't working. We're hemorrhaging money going in this direction. Maybe we shouldn't do that and we should go back a different direction. We talk about what makes you really decisive on the battlefield is small iterative decisions. So rather than one giant decision of we're going to retreat or we're going to fall back or we're going to make a giant maneuver to left or right, you make these small series of iterative decisions in the direction that you think is best. And, then when you see like, okay, it's not what I thought it was, I can readjust, and you're not married to a certain plan.
You're not like, you haven't dove off the cliff. You've at least like tried to switch back and navigate to where you're like, oh wait, there's no way down right there. I got to go back, maybe approach it from this way, before I could get down there.
Exactly, but it's kind of like, I mean, if you're going to use like a land navigation example like that, instead of me deciding that I'm going to go from here, to a point that's like 10 miles, in another direction. I mean, what if I'm not really sure that that's the place that we need to go? Then maybe I'm just going to move 200 yards that direction in the direction I think I need to go, and let's see if the pathway actually works and see if it's navigable terrain and we can actually make it there. So I think that's. Until instead of just making a giant commitment and saying, hey, I'll meet you there and let's, at the rendezvous point 10 miles away, we'll start to move in a direction where we think we need to go, and then we can evaluate our route from there and we can readjust if we need to. And I think that's ego can just lead you down the path just to say, all you got to do is just say, hey, you know what, I was totally wrong about that. I thought this way, and it's so hard for people to do that. And myself included, it's incredibly hard to put your own ego in check. But to your point about what businesses are, the most difficult, I mean, I think we see great leaders in startups. We see, in small companies, and we see great leaders in, mid-sized companies. We see great leaders in big companies too. I mean, it's,
Where do you see the highest failure though?
I don't know. Frankly, I think the leaders, there's different, like, you got agility and they can move and make things happen rapidly, in a smaller company versus a larger, more bureaucratic organization and a huge corporation that has to get approval through, boards or, even shareholders and et cetera. So there's more, they're more nimble, certainly when they're small, but the big, I think I don't think there's one that's more, I wouldn't categorize as far as leaders go, because there's successful leaders and unsuccessful leaders in all of those situations. Yeah. I think the thing that really makes people stand out, though, it's whether or not they can put their ego in check. And if you can take ownership, number one, that's why we titled the first book Extreme Ownership, because if you're going to cast blame, if you're going to make excuses, if you're going to point fingers, you're not going to be successful. I have had people say, there was a client recently we were working with, and he said, well, this is a great concept, and it was kind of a mid-sized company. He's like, this would never work at this giant corporation that I used to work at. And I was like, that's interesting that you say that. And he's like, yeah, people just, if you took ownership of something, you would just get trampled on. And, it was always just point fingers and let somebody else take the fall. And that just wasn't the culture there. And so I asked him what corporation he was talking about. And they're actually a client of ours. And we actually helped one of their particular projects, we'll call it, turn around their performance. I mean, they got all kinds of accolades over the last year or two in like most improved and for the all kinds of like successful numbers when they were ranked last of all their particular projects previously. So this is it's just an example of like it doesn't matter where you are. If you do this stuff, it works. If you're taking ownership of things, if you stop casting blame, you stop making excuses, and you start implementing solutions to problems, it works. And I don't care if you're a Fortune 50 company or if you're a brand new startup, with one employee. I mean, it absolutely works. And you think strategically, you think about building relationships long term. And you're willing to actually evaluate, what works and what doesn't work, and make adjustments accordingly. I mean, those kind of people are going to be successful wherever they are.
I feel like common denominators are, like, for me when I coach, so many of the things that I look for are common denominators. And as much as sometimes ego makes people want to argue them with me, like, I just know, listen, you're dealing with a rule of average. There's a ton, there's a lot of countless people to where have made this same argument, and I've proven, this is your way of thinking, but it's not what the end result's going to be. Like, there's no way it's happened. But I feel like sometimes learning those common denominators are what helps you avoid mistakes. So when I said, like, do you recognize a pattern, versus the startups or the bigger ones? For me, it would be a cool learning curve to try to see, like, if you said, now that I think about it, it seems like the startups, like you said, reacted quicker. They were able to make adjustments, especially with things like COVID, where like some major decisions might have to be made. I mean, you guys were like super impressive how fast you went EF online. That was, I don't know if that was already in the tank, but hadn't like came out yet, or if that was a freaking, move adjustment, but it was like ahead of its time. I think. I
appreciate that. We actually had that in place prior to that, just, for about not quite a year, I guess. But it was definitely I think what COVID did for us, when all of a sudden, I think we had 37 events canceled in mid-March. I mean, all these in-person training events and everything just went to zero. And so it really forced us to focus on the virtual side of things, which we knew we needed to do anyway, because we can reach more people and impact more people and share more leadership lessons with folks all over the world. So I think we have over 60 countries represented on that thing right now, which is pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, Sharon and I signed up. So
that's awesome.
I told you that this would be, like I said, sometimes when I do something like that, it's not necessarily for me, it's not for business. I'm not looking at it as, I feel like I want to like be able to run a bigger business or anything. For me, it's like, how many of these things can I take and apply to how I could be a more disciplined hunter, how I could be better in a camp, how I could be a better like partner for someone that technically I work for, right? Like, how can I be a better ambassador? Because for me, the way I'm looking at it is, if I'm representing a company, then technically I'm an employee, and I'm going to strive to get a good review. I'm going to strive to help that company progress. And in all those qualities seem to parallel. Like, they parallel whether you're, in a business and you are a leader, or whether you're a representative of someone where, you need to be there for support in the right way. So, I'm trying to take stuff away from that as a way to grow as a hunter, an ambassador, a friend, rather than from, strictly the business side of ththings.
It applies across the board. I think, everything that we talk about from a leadership perspective applies. It works on the home front too, with your spouse, with your kids. And I think, in your communities, within your family, I think as long as we're all striving to get better. And I think what's awesome about, what you're saying, John, is that when you're taking a look at like, okay, how can I get better? It's interesting to see, someone who's built a successful business and has impacted people and spreading, archery to so many people, that maybe not otherwise would have turned to archery. And it's not surprising to me that you come from that spirit of humility of like, okay, I'm always trying to get better. What can I learn? How can I do better? How can I improve? And I think that is, we get asked all the time, what's the most important quality of a leader? And the answer is humility, because when you can't check your ego, you can't get any better. Why would you try to get any better if you got it all figured out? You don't. Why would I listen to you? Why would I listen to anybody else? I got it all figured out. And you don't learn, you don't adapt, you don't innovate, you don't educate yourself, and ultimately you stop respecting your competition. You get complacent. Even on the battlefield, this happens. When it's life or death, you go into an area where, we know that 100 enemy fighters might overrun our, 24 guys and kill everybody. That could happen at any moment. And we go on an operation, we've done 6 or 8 operations in that area. People kind of just start assuming, well, it hasn't happened, so it won't happen. So you really have to fight against that all the time. And at every level, you got to have good leaders at every level of that team that are constantly reminding people about what's at stake if we're not prepared, and why we have to do certain things, and why we have to be disciplined, and why you can't be falling asleep on the stairwell if that's your position. To keep it watch out, because everybody else is, you got everybody else's back. So, and then ultimately, if you can't check your ego, I mean, you can't self-assess. You can't look at yourself and say, what can I do better? And that's what you're talking about. I think that is what drives, I think, the most successful people anywhere in life, is that they're always looking to improve. And it's the kind of run and joke in the SEAL teams when we do like kill house runs, so we're practicing clearing hallways and rooms, and the run and joke is always like, you get done with the debrief and you're waiting for the instructor staff to tell you how you did, and or one of the leaders is going to stand up and debrief, the run, and so the joke is like, best you've ever seen, because it's never that.
Yeah.
It's never best you've ever seen. There's always something to improve on. There's always something you screwed up, and so it's what makes it's what makes the best leaders good, is they're constantly improving.
Did you know Jocko very much before, like, you guys went to Ramadi? How far? Like, when did you first connect?
I met Jocko. I'd heard of Jocko prior to that. I mean, he had a reputation in the SEAL teams that we were familiar with, and I had never met Jocko before I checked into SEAL Team 3 in the spring of 2005. And he was I had checked in just prior to that, so I knew that he was coming. And then when he showed up, I met him for the very first time, and he walked up to me and the other platoon commander, Seth Stone. We knew we were going to be the two platoon commanders. I went through BUDS with Seth, our basic training in the SEAL teams. We went through our advanced training, SEAL qualification training together, and then we were roommates. We lived together for a long time. I mean, he was a real close friend of mine, and so we got to meet. We're standing there in formation out behind the team, and Jocko walked to us just with a total scowl and glare on his face, and just said, "I'm Jocko." Didn't smile and like walked away. That was it. Like, no smile. I don't think he smiled for the first 2 months that we worked together. And then it was, and so the other platoon commander, Seth, was like, "That guy hates me. I can tell he wants to fire me." And I was like, "Hey man, we're gonna be good." Like, everyone has said, like, Jocko's the man. He's the absolute guy we want as our task unit commander. Just let's train jiu-jitsu. Let's get after it, and it'll be fine. Trust me. And of course they ended up being super, super close friends, But
I wonder when when did like Jocko officially freaking hit the map? I mean, do you think he was like humble pie during BUDS, or was he still just like freaking just straight up? Have you ever talked to anyone that put him through BUDS?
I know several guys that went through BUDS with him, and he was just a young, eager team guy that was like Mr. Hardcore. It was what he had the reputation of, hitting the surf and getting wet and sandy before the instructor even told him to do it, and it was just like, I'm going to be more hardcore than anybody else. And he jokes about it, how he went to his first SEAL team. This is like in the early 90s, and he's like expecting he's going to go to Vietnam. It's like, hey man, Vietnam's been over for 20 years, buddy. So we, but no, I didn't know the young Jocko, actually. And in fact, the only Jocko I'd never known was the Jocko with the shaved head. It was Mr. Ultra Squared Away. And so he had a picture on his wall, and Seth and I were over at his house one time. And so there's a picture of Jocko and his wife on the wall, family pictures on the wall. And so there's a picture of Jocko's wife and some dude, with like long, like boy band looking hair and sideburns, and I'm like, and this guy's got his arm around Jocko's wife, and we're like, we'd had a few drinks, and Seth and I are like, who is that? Who's got their arm? Like, we're ready to go fight somebody. And he's like, that's me. And I'm like, wait, what? You had long hair and sideburns? I don't understand.
Damn.
So yeah, there was a time he didn't have a shaved head. Yeah.
Dang. Went from the bangs to freaking growing out the flow, huh?
Oh. But it was look, I
wonder when he like stepped into the role of, being a leader. Because it's like at some point someone makes that decision to where, obviously he had, like you said, there was discipline to studying up on knowing what he needed to do to, you know, kind of take the lead and being responsible at some point, right? So
I mean, from the time I've known him, he's always been a tremendous student of leadership, and I think that's, you know, a lot of. I know that he talks about a platoon commander that he had when he was a young enlisted guy who he admired tremendously, who gave him ownership of stuff and let him and his, you know, junior enlisted guys run stuff in the platoon and treated them with respect and was just a leader that they could really look up to and made their lives better. And so what he wanted to do was try to make the lives better for 16 guys in a SEAL platoon, you know. So he got commissioned as an officer, you know, in order to do that. And I always wanted to be in the SEAL teams from the time I was a kid growing up in Southeast Texas and, you know, playing with G.I. Joe figures in my sandbox. I went to the Naval Academy, you know, for 4 years, and a lot of the leadership I learned there was what not to do. You know, from I never want to be a leader like that person. I definitely never want to treat someone like that person. Talk to me. You know, there's a lot of negative.
How much of it did you apply? Like, how much from what you were taught did you come out of there and be like, okay, this was actually useful information?
There were some great leaders that provided examples for sure, and there was again a lot of negative examples of leaders that I never wanted to be like. And I went out and served in the surface fleet for a few years, and then when I finally got a chance to serve in the SEAL teams, I mean that was really the formative years for me as a leader. Was that platoon commander tour working with Jocko, and I think, you know, when I think about Jocko taught me to be the combat leader that I needed to be. And most of what he taught me was stuff that I kind of thought I probably should be doing. But for whatever reason, you know, either I wasn't doing it or I wasn't doing it with confidence. And I think the way he kind of made me look at things in a different way. And it was like, hey, you know, if you're not, I know you might want to be liked by your platoon, but if you're not really holding the line and pushing the standards hard on this training, your guys aren't going to be ready, you know, and that means more of your guys might get killed in combat and don't come home
or
to their
they
families.
Don't pick you to go.
Yeah, so you're actually failing the team if you do that. And so it was the recognition that, you know, not only should I be doing these things over here, but if I wasn't doing those things, I was actually failing. I was failing as a leader. I was failing the team, and that's a very different way of looking at it. So, you know, I think just gave me the confidence to understand, like, okay, this is what we have to do, and I could go and execute with confidence. I mean, it's kind of like shooting today. You know, you were like, hey, you're doing great, but you're, and I'm thinking, man, this feels weird or this feels different. You're like, well, you just got to gain some confidence in that. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing for leadership when, you know, when you got to have the confidence to know that, like, hey, I'm making the right decisions here. This is what I should do. This is what I'm. You know, this is the direction I need to go. This is how I need to lead, take ownership of stuff. You know, I got to do that with confidence. Know that's the right move because I'm responsible for everything. And I think that that is when you have that, it gives you a real power to know, like, okay, that's what good leadership looks like. You know?
That's awesome. What's your takeaways from today? Because obviously, well, for those listening, we had a couple hours because we're going to be together in 2 weeks. I mean, there's a pretty cool crew of us that are going to be hanging out. So I just told you, I'm like, it's going to be a benefit to you to get here for at least 4 hours to where I can, like, get you started on the path, because I think if your index finger would have showed up to tack, I think Jocko would have freaking pounced on that, dude. Because a course like that can eat you up, you know, if you bring bad habits in, like, it's just a cesspool for bad habits to just party hard. So yeah,
I can only imagine. And just even watching some of the videos and hearing the stories from you guys about some of those shots. Look, I'm not at all convinced that I'm not going to be making some terrible shots there. But you know, my biggest takeaway from today is this stuff works. I mean, it absolutely works. And I think, you know, I was again, I've been shooting, I've been shooting bows since I was 3 years old, and I've been shooting a trigger release for 20 plus years, as I said. So I've got a lot of habits that I've formed, and look, I've killed some decent bucks. I killed a Pope and Young, bull elk back in the day a few years ago. So I've had some success there, and almost that, but the bad habits kind of stay, and I'm not, I'm not making 100-yard shots like you are either. So clearly,
you could.
There's a lot that I need to work on, and I think that, and I would feel a lot more confident after our work today making those 100-yard shots. I wouldn't even attempt that.
It's the same shot. It's the same shot that we made. Like, it's the same shot that I posted. It's the exact same shot.
Well, I think that's my biggest takeaway, is that just to know that, like, follow the fundamentals and they work, and they actually work and they deliver. And when you're like, hey, it should feel easy to you. It should feel good when you're in the right position, and I could totally feel that. When you go right to that position, it feels good. It's, you let off you let off the clutch and give it some gas there with your elbow back, and all of a sudden that thing just surprises you and puts it right on the money. And I was like, dang, this shit works. And I think that's awesome. I think it's, it's almost like you cast self-doubt, or you have previous habits and you don't want to let go of that stuff. You think, oh, I've always done it this way. And kind of like leadership, the goal is, okay, what are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to shoot as accurately as I possibly can. And I think all you have to be is willing to open your mind and learn, from someone, like you, who has so much experience in this. And if I'm willing to listen and learn, I mean, it absolutely works. And I think in, just a few hours today, I feel like I have improved. I learned more in those few hours we spent together than my entire 42 years of shooting bows prior put together.
It's cool because you have a different perspective coming in. Like with Jocko, he had never shot. So for him, he knew, and I believed him when he said it. He said, this will be part of my daily routine. And I mean, he knew it. He's like, this, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to shoot 100 arrows a day like Rogan, but he said, I guarantee you I will shoot a few. And he said, it'll be a good thing for me to, like, quiet the chaos at times. So he had a very different perspective, whereas you had already bow hunted. So, like, you technically you were a hunter first and figured out a way to shoot a bow so that you could hunt that way, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I was gun hunting before I was bow hunting, definitely.
Yeah. Whereas a lot of people right now are, like, learning about archery from podcasts. They're learning archery, and then they're going, like Josh Hall, right? Freaking came in, wanted to try archery, and then Jocko said, hey, is it cool if a buddy of mine comes up and shoots with us at TAC? He said he makes surfboards and stuff. I think you'll like him. So I was like, yeah. And then Josh asked me straight up, hey, dude, I'm going to do this elk hunt in New Mexico. Like, what do you think? And I was just like, damn, this guy, like, you're
That's
freaking
awesome.
Like, you're going elk hunting and you've been shooting how long, And then all of a sudden he freaking texts me a pic in September. He's just like, dude, I'm so pumped. And I'm just like, holy crap, this guy did it. Like, he literally learned about archery, went, tried it, like, learned the right way first, then did, like, I think he did like a hog hunt or an axis hunt or something. And then just said, like, yeah, the end goal is I want to be able to, like, provide my own meat, and freaking goes out and gets a bull. And he did it the backwards way, well, compared to me, whereas I was a hunter first. And then it's like, oh, if you want a challenge now you have to figure out how to do it with a bow instead of a gun. So it was like I had a very different approach. But what I will say is I never felt that instant, like, kind of like gratitude, or like, like kind of rewarding feeling. Like, I'll really like this. This is going to be cool. I never really felt that until I made my first shot. Like, because for a long time I was, shooting the wrong draw length, punching the trigger, could freaking shoot unbelievable one day, but then suck the next day. And I remember like how frustrating that was. And you just kind of took it as like, yeah, that's part of like shooting a bow. I never really understood you could actually be good almost all the time if you're doing it the proper way. And I remember when I finally made my first good total surprise shot, I was like, okay, yeah, I've shot a bow, but I've never had that where it like happened like that. And it was a surprise, but it was also freaking dead center. And it was like hitting a hole in one in golf. You know, I referred to it with a friend of mine the other day, and I talked to it about that. I'm like, you know, if you like, how many times have you seen someone make a hole in one in golf? You know, even at 100 yards, even at like, say, you know, how many people have you watched chip one in at 100 yards? Whereas if you shoot an X with a bow at 100 yards, it's a hole in one, right? I mean, that's what it is. And you can, honestly, people that start it brand new can freaking get to that level very fast with simple basics, you know, which I think is incredible because I never looked at it from that perspective, you know, when I first came up from wanting to hunt, then having to learn to shoot.
I think that's a fascinating perspective on it. And that's been one of the toughest things for me as a bow hunter is, you know, I'll go out and drill bullseyes in my backyard in a 3D target, and then you're sitting on the stand and you get one opportunity and you just totally miss the shot. Yeah, and it would be so frustrating. Like, how did I miss that? You know, how did that happen? Or, you know, if you wound an animal, I mean, just, you know, all those things that are the least fun parts of hunting that are, you know, it's the incredibly, you know, highest highs and the lowest of lows, you know, and particularly when you're putting in the work for, you know, an elk hunt, you know, and I think it's awesome to know that, like, hey, this is a skill and you can get better at doing it. And if you do these fundamentals, then you're going to be, you can use that skill in any capacity, and you're going to be consistently able to accurately, you know, engage and not have to make a bad shot or not, you know. In fact, it's funny, in particular, talking about, you know, we were talking about elk hunting today, and I've been in a lot of gunfights in my time in Iraq, and those times in Ramadi, we got shot at a lot. I've been shot, I've been blown up, I've gotten a chance to be in a lot of firefights, and I've never been as excited. I've never been just shaking, you know, with excitement or, you know, the buck fever as I have been when I'm in a bow hunting situation, when you're so close to an animal that's coming in and you're sitting there getting excited. And that's happened to me with whitetails, and even more so with elk. You got a big, you know, bull bugling and coming in on you and busting brush, and it's just awesome. But I think part of that too is, you know, being able to use those fundamentals and get that silverback to the right spot where you're, you know, making that good surprise shot that's going to be accurate and controlling it. And in fact, I just had a buddy of mine send me a text, somebody that you've trained with, a guy named Thomas Alfred that I used to train jiu-jitsu with, and he just sent me a picture of a Cape buffalo that he shot with a silverback. And he said, "Man, I would never have been able to control my nerves without being able to use this."
That's freaking.
He said to tell you thank you.
Yeah, that's dynamite. Did you have a moment like that at all today? Kind of like what I was talking about. Because you kind of learned a new way of shooting, and I guess maybe to backtrack for people listening, I told you part of what I think makes this system work is that we've pretty much given an unsubordinate officer a new task to where he's actually doesn't have control to now control the situation, right? Which is what we're doing by going to a handheld release versus an index finger release, which, you know, you had shot so long that you were really worried, like, what your brain was going to think, you know, with the target. And I knew there'd be some hiccups because there's certain times where there's like, you kind of overthink it to where, and maybe I think there was 2 times where I could see like, there'd be like, wait, you're there. Why aren't you letting this shot happen? But for the most part, because we manipulated how the activation happens, now it's a completely new process. So technically you don't have a habit because we've given you an entirely new task. So you haven't done that task yet. So there might be old habits or old tendencies, but there's not an old habit to where it's like going to happen because it's ingrained. It's like there might be a reactive motor skill function that's happening. So I was confident we were going to be able to move past what you were worried about. But do you remember one shot that just felt perfect today? Do you remember one in particular?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Which one was it?
I think, I think it was I'd probably already taken, I don't know, 6 or 8 shots, and I think when I got, I think when I finally got to a position where, you kind of work on my anchor point, getting that hand in the right position. And I think I felt like it just went straight there. I was able to get on the sight, get on just a good sight picture, looking through that peep sight and then just thinking about easing off the clutch and just coming back on the gas there and just having to feel good and being like, wow, that was easy. Wow, that was awesome. And that surprise shot, I also realized so many of those bad shots I was making, I'm freaking jerking the trigger. And I can't do that with the silverback. I can't jerk the trigger. Yeah. So I think even what I loved was, taking my trigger finger completely out of that. Mm-hmm. And it's, it's pretty cool to think, it's more like shooting with fingers, which obviously human beings have been doing for thousands of years, way before they had trigger releases. So for a long time. So I think that I remember at least one and multiple shots. I think that just felt really smooth, really good, and I love just being surprised as that thing went off. It was like, dang, this thing works. That's awesome.
Was there one analogy that stood out that helped you, like more so than others? Was there one analogy that I talked about where it like really hit home, where you're like, oh yeah, I totally, like, now this is something new that I haven't really thought of that way, but 100% get it now?
Yeah, look, I mean, you gave some great analogies. I think that were very powerful. I think one of the ones that stood out to me was just the idea of bringing that, instead of getting on your peep side, like, getting to your
anchor.
Yeah, first. Getting to your anchor point first.
Yeah, and
then actually, lining up the sights. And I think, bringing that thing right to your eye, that really helped me a lot. And then, the analogy that you and I were talking about was when you're, if you're using a combat rifle, if you're shooting ARs, what a lot of people will do as a bad habit that have been, trained properly is they're going to bring that thing up to their shoulder and then they're going to lean their head over to look down the sights instead of actually just bringing that thing right up to your shoulder, and you're bringing the sight right to your eyes. So you're looking down at the target the whole time. You're not moving your head at all. And that was something that resonated with me because I was doing the opposite of that with my bow for a long time, of kind of just, bringing it back and then kind of leaning over rather than just getting it, getting in the right position first and then getting on that.
We were really talking about, when you draw a bow back and it stops, you need to learn to be able to bring that anchor over to your face and not have to take your whole face over to the anchor and manipulate your head. Or, we were talking about when you draw back, there's a triangle and you have the ability to like move that triangle up, down, back and forth, like based on a bunch of things. But if you can get to the point where if you took a picture of yourself at full draw in like the best full draw position you've ever done, where you're like, man, I look perfect in that picture. The goal is to be able to draw that bow back. And when that triangle stops, to be able to move that triangle to that exact placement as if you were to be in a photo. Like, how do you draw in where it stops and where you have to move to that final picture perfect position? Can you get in the habit of of doing that to where when you do draw and stop, you are so close to that end position that you're not like wasting added movement of a head, a shoulder, an anchor position, trying to change your hand position. Like, how can you do that exact motion so efficient to where you're barely moving in to acquire the peep sight once you're anchored? And when you do that, man, do you start, shots just start happening faster because you're already in alignment. You haven't like changed so many things that, you've like manipulated yourself to where now it's not really going to activate as easy as what you would want it to. But it's really hard to explain to people like on a podcast or if they're not there. Cause like when I'm watching you, I'm trying my best to explain it. And sometimes you don't get it. And actually, like sometimes if I draw it the way I did with you, like right away, people just, oh, I see what you're trying to say. And sometimes they don't get that. And I'll have to like hold an arrow or, I'll have to like take a little piece of string, like a shot trainer, and show them like, okay, hey, here's this. And it's funny, different people like get it different ways. You can't, like, I can't just do it that way all the time because sometimes people have no idea what I'm talking about when I try to explain it like that.
I mean, the explanations were awesome today. I mean, one of the ones that stood out too was the leaning on the door. I mean, I think that was,
which is really cool because a lot of people wouldn't say that was one of the analogies that helped them. But you really got that. You probably have, I would say out of all the students that I've ever had that had front hand issues, you were the best I've ever had at once I talked through that whole grip portion to where when you grabbed your bow and you actually leaned on it, I'm like, okay, this guy. So one of the indicators for me, if I sight your bow in and I was shooting it, which I did before I handed it to you, I wanted to know where we were hitting with your bow and that release. And so I was hitting at 3:00 on the X ring. I don't know if you paid attention, like when I warmed up, I was hitting at 3:00. And I kind of wanted to just take note because we hadn't fine-tuned your sight exactly to you. So I just wanted to know where it was for me. And so for you to then start shooting and grab that bow, and when you were making good shots, now granted there's a few times where I corrected your grip and you hit low right, which we talked through. But when you made that hand placement, I'm like, okay, if he does everything else, he's just going to hit in the same holes as me. And you did. Like, honestly, you hit in the same hole as me as when I blank bailed on that. I was just, subconscious was probably just putting my pin in the middle of that whole big ass bail. That's just your subconscious, just like, oh, I'm just going to center this thing. And I shot. And then I gave it to you and said, like, hey, you don't really have to aim at anything. Just go. And then you shot my freaking arrow hole, remember? Because we were the first 2 arrows in that whole 4-foot bail. So I was like, okay, well, his subconscious just did the same. And then we shot for a while blank bail, and you were doing good, not really aiming at anything. And then we took a rest. Then I said, okay, I'd like to do one more exercise, which that was when I actually had a spot in front of you and kind of walked you through like, okay, here's what's getting ready to happen. You're going to tell me it's not going to happen, but I know it's going to happen. You're going to draw back on this thing. And as much as I'm going to tell you it doesn't matter, there's a bullseye down there now, you're actually going to freaking, spaz out. And you're like, no, I got it. And I'm like, okay, I hope so. But, sure enough, like what happens, right? Yeah. At times there's patterns. And, but once we kind of got that dialed in, I mean, you were shooting in my arrow holes. So the fact that your lefts and rights mirrored mine, a lot of times when if someone says like, hey, shoot my bow for me, I want to beat you with my bow, I'll like hold it up and I can look down it and I can know right away like, oh, this person torques hard this way. And then I'll kind of know in my mind, I better aim X amount off, or otherwise I'm not even freaking be on this target type thing. Because yeah, I can see by their alignment through their system how much torque they're applying to their front grip or facial pressure that they would have. So as soon as you hit in those same holes and then you hit again and again, I'm like, okay, damn, his front hand is as good as it would. And do you remember I even made a comment to you? I said, dude, like you have the possibility to freaking own some dudes up at the tack thing. I'm like, you and honestly, it's because you have, it's like what we talked about with jiu-jitsu. Like, you know, you go level 19 berserker mode on someone, you know, like the less tense you can be, like what you were saying is, you know, if you like the more tense you are, a lot of times it's counterintuitive. Like if you're tense one way, someone good will know that, and then they're going to play off that tension. So with your front bow hand, the fact that you lack tension there is going to make you more accurate, like without you even knowing it. And someone who struggles with tension in the front hand, like Jocko, you know, you have the ability to be more accurate than him just because of that alone right now, which is kind of cool. Because if you really boil it down, you know, that was one of the key factors, but it was also number 2 in what I told you. Like, you know, hey, I'm only going to talk to you about 5 things, but these 5 things will change your game. Like it'll change your game. You're either going to beat people you never thought you'd beat, or you're going to suck worse than what I know you're capable of. But
it may be the latter. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but look, I mean, I thought that was mind blowing to me, and I realized, you know, a lot of you talked about shooting left, you know, just based on your grip and you know, based on your how you're holding your shoulder, and I mean all those things that. As you were saying those things today, I'm like, oh, that explains it. That explains why I do this. That explains why I miffed that shot. You know, when I've got the one shot for the deer, it's coming in. I've been, you know, and it's a lot of that the hand placement in particular was, you're like, yeah, your fingers are white. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, because it didn't seem like that. And then when you went through, you know, we went through the drill of leaning on the door, and then when you kind of, you know, talked to me about just holding my hand there with, you know, almost no pressure at all, and no grip from the fingers.
And you're like, yeah, I can't do that. And I'm like, okay.
Well, and then you showed me, and I was like, oh, that's no problem. and I think, you know, that's a lot of times it seems like, you know, we talked about this before, right? People just think, oh, well, look, John Dudley can do that. He can shoot like that. I can't shoot like that. But obviously, like leadership, we were just talking about as a skill, like, you know, this is a skill, and they're fundamentals that if you do them, they actually work. And I was blown away by that. I think that was a real eye-opener to me of just getting that hand placement right. And I think once you kind of showed me how to do it, I felt good. And then you're like, hey, the reason your bubble's off a little bit is because you're putting too much torque on your thumb. And then now I had to adjust that. And I think, you know, those last 6 or 8 shots that I took where I was really thinking about, you know, controlling that, and it was no factor. And I was right in position. The bow was level. It was no factor at all, just based on that little adjustment. It was awesome.
That's cool. So what's your plans moving forward? Where are you going to take it?
Where am I going to take?
Seems like there's a party outside. I can hear it in my headphones.
Somebody's jamming out.
Yeah, they're getting after it out there.
Where am I going to take the archery?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to keep building on these fundamentals, and I think like anything, you know, we talk about leadership, right? You can't just sit through a single seminar or read a book and think you're going to be the greatest leader ever, right?
Yeah.
You can't go to the gym one time and think you're going to be the best shape of your life. You got to do it all the time, and I think what I need to do is just, I mean, I've got 3D targets and a couple block targets in my backyard. I can get out to a 60 or 70 yard shot, you know. Right in my backyard and back home in Texas. And I think I want to keep at this. And then I want to make sure I don't revert back to old habits. And what I know I'm going to have to do is, you know, is make sure that I get some instruction from you, you know, so that I'm not as I'm acquiring bad habits, I'm like, okay, hey, this isn't working, or hey, I'm having this issue, and just follow back up to see, okay, what can we do to continue to improve, or now what things, okay, I've gotten these big things fixed, now what little small things can I tweak and fix? And I want to just continue on the path of just trying to get better, and I'd love to be able to go out there and make those tough 100-yard shots at the Total Archery Challenge and nail those
They're
things.
not that tough. You'll be surprised. But one of the things that I'll tell you is you have tools right now. It would be like, so like some of the things that I told you today, I feel like are critical. But you also have the tools, like you have the tools to go home and dial. Like I probably shouldn't have put a scale on your bow to where you can just dial your sight and like shoot whatever the hell you want. Because it would be like day one in a jiu-jitsu class, you talking to someone about like that choke we were talking about today, where it's like, okay, you've given this dude the tools to choke someone out, but he really like, he can use that in a negative way, or he could actually recreate some really bad habits in the meantime, because he's just going to be going for the chokehold all the time. Right. So like one of the things that I think is super critical, because this has been a game breaker for people that come here. And even tonight I debated, we almost went out back and I almost wanted to show you what I knew you could do. But then I thought like, okay, great. This is going to open up a can of worms. Like, so, like with Jocko, I just said, hey, I want you to work close, because if you did nothing different for the next 2 weeks, other than what we did today, and like worked on that execution to where you weren't putting in a bunch of variables that continually change, to where the factors are like always moving, wind, different size target, lighting conditions, distractions of your kids running out, like all that stuff just starts to factor in to where, okay, you have like right now you've made 50 shots that are, with the goal of being good. But if you go and make one bad practice where you're trying to shoot too far, or it's windy, or your kids are running out, and if you shoot another 50 arrows and 25 of those are distracted, well, now already 30% of your freaking training to your new hand position or whatever, 30% of it has already been incorrect. Because you're like trying to go too far too fast.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like tonight with when we were like playing guitar, because I'm like 3 days in or whatever it is, 4 or 5 days in. You were saying like, hey, have you learned this yet? And I'm like, dude, I'm learning 8 chords, and all I'm doing is drills. I am drilling, like just learning to play those 8 chords and move my fingers to those 8 chords. I'm not like doing anything else fancy, but I've watched some videos because I'm curious, like what is this other stuff I'm seeing, but I'm not like trying it, because I also want to get to the point where I say like, yeah, I can do this. I want to be able to, like, if someone just yelled out a chord letter, I'd just say, okay, that, but I don't feel like I'm to that point. So I just know from a progression standpoint, if I try to progress too fast, it can also be negative, even though I have the tool. Like you even said, well, if you can play that, you can play this song. And you started to tell me, and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't want to know, because I'm going to just focus on freaking going for the home run and playing Every Rose Has Its Thorn for Jocko, in Montana, and singing it to him. But I also know that if I freaking work on that for like 2 weeks, that's also going to be the only thing that I know. So I want to drill fundamentals and drill fundamentals and drill fundamentals to where it's like, okay, I don't have to like refresh myself every morning of like, okay, yeah, not the bottom string, it's the second string from the top. Like when I just can wake up in the morning foggy headed and I can just run through those chords, then at that point I'm like, okay, I'm going to implement something new. So kind of, if you take that new mentality or my mentality to what I taught you that's new for archery, and you just focus on drilling for 2 weeks, and like, honestly, if you don't shoot past 10 yards until I see you in Montana, dude, I can work with that.
Awesome.
Like, you know, I can take you out for an hour the night before attack if you've done nothing but what we did today. Because you're less likely to like bring in a new bad habit that is like dug in deeper than what I know you would get just shooting close. Like you might realize like, oh man, I forgot the string wasn't supposed to be on the tip of my nose. It's supposed to be on the side. Or sorry, I said that backwards. It's not supposed to be on the side of my nose. It's supposed to be on the tip of my nose type thing. Something like that you just hadn't thought about. It's not like life or death. We could probably correct it. I could watch you shoot a few times and be like, hey, you know, you're drawing down the side of the face. You'd be like, all right, you check it in. But when you start shooting longer distances or trying to, you know, freaking jam out too soon, like next thing you know, it's not just you're out of tune. So, it's like you're freaking strumming off beat and, you know, whatever.
So it sounds like what you're saying, John, is that I shouldn't stand up and have my buddy hold a Discipline Go can at 78 yards and try to nail that thing with my bow.
No, do not do that.
Like obviously I would never do that. That's don't do that. If you're listening to this, that's super dangerous. What you're saying is it makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, people try to get too far ahead of themselves. You got to prioritize and execute. If you're trying to learn everything, you're going to learn nothing.
Yeah.
But I think that we saw that in the SEAL teams a lot. People would say, you know, I want to do advanced tactics. And, you know, what we would always say is like, well, advanced tactics is doing the basics well.
Yeah.
And if you're not good at the basics, you know, I mean, you're not going to be able to do something advanced beyond that if they're trying to skip basics and not having a good fundamentals down. And so they're not going to be successful in that regard. So, I mean, that's really what I want to do is focus on the fundamentals. I don't need to shoot at 70, 80 yards, you know, with these, 10 yards is great. 20, you know, maybe 20 yards is certainly adequate to me as well. And I think just focusing on those fundamentals and trying to make those my habits is what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, because eventually you'll find out, you know, if you can execute within the box, like, you know, you had your own box on the ground. If you can execute within that, the distance doesn't really matter, because at the most part, if it's a scoring type event, the size of the circle grows proportionally with the distance. So, I mean, it's not like if you're shooting 100 yards, you're still shooting that quarter. You know, you're shooting like at 100 yards, the 10 rings now, you know, the size of a plate type thing. It proportionally grows as you multiply back. It multiplies in size too. So it honestly looks the same. Like if you have a scope and you're looking at it, like what your sight picture is and how big your pin is at a 10 ring at 18 meters, it's what your pin would look like at a face at 90 meters, because it's, you know, at that point it's 122 centimeters, you know, the total face. It's not like, you know, a fraction of that. So the sight picture is the same. And so the arrow, instead of it being 1/10 of an inch off, it's, you know, 2 inches off or whatever. It's like a multiplier. If your mistakes are the same up close, they're going to land the same place downrange if there's not like weather factoring in. You know, if it's windy or if you're dealing with more drift, that's one thing. But the execution always dictates the outcome. You know, it's like when you don't execute, then the outcome is not a certainty. It's a guess. It's a roll of the dice.
Makes sense. I'll keep working on those fundamentals. Definitely. I won't get too ahead of myself there, but I'm sure there will be things that I'm screwing up, and I look forward to getting tightened up again with with you and just build that into habits. I've got quite a few years of habits to overcome.
You don't really, though. The more you tell yourself that, the more you do. You've told yourself more bad habits than I've seen you have.
Well, that's great to hear. And I think what you've proven is that, you can talk me out of this pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I told you, I said, you're going to get reprogrammed. You're going to get reprogrammed here. So
one thing that you did today that I thought was super powerful is, we always say, explaining the why is crucial, right? You want people to perform a certain way instead of just saying, no, do it this way. Instead of telling them what to do, you got to explain why that they're doing it and what the outcome's going to be, or why if you don't do it that way, what the negative outcome's going to be as well. And I thought you did an amazing job of that, going through that. I mean, whether it was hand positioning and stance and not letting your shoulder kind of, get out of position, or why you can't bring your head down, what the result's going to be, or if your hand's not in the right spot, at your anchor point. I think those things, that was a really powerful thing for me, because I felt like I left, it helped me overcome those habits, because I felt like I truly understood, okay, why I shouldn't do that, and how that's going to lead, to throwing the shot off. So that was really solid, and I think that will help me going forward, definitely.
That's awesome, dude. Well, I look forward to it. This was super fun. Sorry you got to go so soon, but you got Echelon Front stuff to freaking get done.
I appreciate it, John. The hospitality's been awesome, and man, it was just so great being here with you, and I look forward to shooting with you up in Montana real soon.
It's awesome, dude. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks
Knock on, everybody. Be sure to check out knockonarchery.com for our full line of custom designed products, as well as free in-depth education and bow hunting entertainment to help you shoot at your best.